Hi, folks. Recently, I've been putting something together, kind of a pictorial collage or a biography of my family with personal photos and references to comic books read at the time and stuff. And I came across something that I thought I'd throw up for a different reason here. Um, what you're looking at here is the my copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 212 from back in the day, which would be, well, let's see, we got a January, it says January 1980, so that would probably back it up to about October, November 1980. Okay, because these were usually a few months back. But during that time, I was living on just off the Kingsway roadway in Vancouver, BC. I'm not sure what street. I recently checked that on Google Maps, but don't have that right now. But anyway, at the time, that was basically when I started reading the comic books I was collecting. I had a collection of Amazing Spider-Man books previous to that were long since sold or I moved on away from. But when I started to buckle down on my collection, I think it started at 190 with the Man-Wolf stuff, the John Jameson stuff, up to the early 200s. But anyway, I had picked those up from a friend at the time that lived directly across from me while I was living up there on the Kingsway. His name was Nelson, and I ended up trading him for, I think it was some Star Wars action figures or something like that. That would have put me at that time, I was still 10 years old. And anyway, I got that little stack, and I decided I was going to collect on top of that, but I started reading much later. Like, I didn't bring those issues back home and start reading them, the earlier ones. And actually, at that time, when those particular issues were on the stand, I was not reading at all. I mean, back in the day when I could have collected them from the newsstand, I was just picking them up, drawing pictures, and collecting. I didn't read the comics that much. That's when I was 8 and 9 and stuff. Just looking at pictures. I had picked up the book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, from my library at that time, and I was learning how to draw, but not so much reading the comics. A little bit. I noticed some of my friends were reading Richie Rich and stuff, or Mads, Don Martin stuff, and things like that. And that stuff I kind of read, right? But didn't really get into the full stories of it. But by this time I was, and I started somewhere around here at 212. Now, later I would go back to the back issues and start further back, because I was like, well, wait, you got these? What? Don't you want to know what happened before? It seemed somehow important, but I went back. But this was when that started happening, and it was just before a move out to Burnaby, to a nicer place, actually. But I remember going down to the corner store and getting these issues in Vancouver. Sometimes in the rain, sometimes in the snow. Yes, you did get snow in Vancouver. Don't let them lie to you. But anyway, this was the introduction to the Hydro Man. The Hydro Man. Waterboy, whatever. What to say about this? What I found interesting. Recently, I noticed something in here. I'll just point out quickly, because I went back to them in pulling them out today and realized there was something in there that I hadn't noticed before. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, so all you really needed to know about the 212 issue really is that Hydro Man gets into it with Spidey as he gets these powers. New introduction to, and just to repeat, where are we here? Oh yeah, to repeat, Spidey's new love interest at the time, Debbie Whitman, and the other character is this, as I described her, barroom floozy, hard-boiled type love interest of our new Hydro Man character here. She comes back to the bar a little later after he's made his transformation. She seems fuming mad. Where is he? Whatever. But just remember her character for a little bit later. We'll get back to that. So that brings us up to a 3-part series that would start after that. And I also remember buying this in that same area. 213 down at the corner store around from me. Around from, the corner of my house, whatever. But anyway, it was a 3-part series that but brought into play the Wizard from Fantastic Four fame. And it would be a 3-part series that involved a Spider Slayer, a new one, and the Submariner, and the Frightful Four. And that would lead to the issue in question. Now, the reason this one was important was that later on... Now, let me just take a look at this. I'm curious about something here. I want to find out just who was doing who the pencilers were on this one. Let's see. Okay, we have an introduction here. Oh yeah, here we go. Here we go again. It was John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney. The combination used to be, just previous to that was Jim Mooney and what was his name? Oh my goodness, I've already forgotten. Keith Pollard, who started in issue 186. He was doing the pencils, and Mooney was laying down the finishes. And now Mooney was working with Romita to bring up stuff. And to tell you the truth, this is John Romita Jr. cover with Al Milgrom doing the inks, right? And once you flip her open here and you take a look at this stuff's fantastic. And when I say that, I don't associate that word with John Romita Jr.'s work at all. Found it blocky and coarse the more prolific he became, but it appealed to a lot of people. By the time you got to the X-Men in, 83, 84, you could already see there was a kind of like a sparseness of line within it that I could recognize, and it was good and it was competent, and you could see he was doing the do, right? But it wasn't quite the same as this kind of thing that was more indigenous to the 70s and early 80s work, which I thought was much better. But there you have it. But remember these panels here. This is the opening splash, right? Spidey and Sub, dazed, bonked around a bit with the Frightful Four hanging out on top of them, ready to kick their asses. But, and these 2 pages, right? The following, where they get into the slugfest. Now, yeah, there's page 1, right? And page 2 here, where the battle continues. Well, look at that. I'm sorry, but what were they thinking? Gross? Did they miss something there? Just look at that. Look at Sandman's forearm and Spidey's position below. That's just fucked up. Okay, that had to go. Someone else pointed that out online. I saw it and I thought, yeah, I remember thinking that. In fact, I remember thinking that when I went back to, let's see, this was, yeah, as I said, this is 81 here in this 215 issue, but later in 83, shortly after turning 13, I found myself in Toronto now, our first house at the time, and I was doing recreations of panels that I was reading. Hold on a second. Yeah, I was doing recreations of the various issues I had. Like I'd open up and basically, I call them recreations, but that's probably not the best term for it. There is such a thing, which I've done, but it was more about rendering what I was actually seeing. I figured if I could make freehand copies of what I was seeing, I was on the right track, and that was part of my development. See, the thing was, I was pretty much self-taught, from, I guess, from whenever I first started picking up a pen and through to my adolescence and into my early teens. So by this time I was just turned 13, and I decided to do some freehand drawing of what I was looking at. It's pretty coarse, and I get a laugh of it when I look at it now today. But I thought I'd dig it out of the archives because I'm still fortunate enough to have it and just display that here. So, start with opening splash, right? Look at that. Okay. Like, it's weird. Like, I changed the position of the figures, as you'll see. And, like, for example, look here. This is the opening splash I did with, right? With our group, right? These, look at Wizard. He's not holding up his gun and stuff. See, I would later learn that things like that were important. Like, Wizard with his gun pointing down like that, it's less dynamic, less energetic, and these things would matter in telling the story. But at that time, I wasn't thinking anything about telling the story. It was all about just drawing things the way. So I don't really have an explanation as to why I would not put him in the same position there. That being said, take a peek at this again. See, even though not much is happening here, the figures are still twisted and contorted into energetic positions where you can still get a sense of energy. And in here, Subby's head's down, you can't see his face, but in my drawing you can, and you can see the little sparkles around his face and stuff. Like, these changes I was making, like, I look at it now and I think, well, who the fuck did I think I was trying to, But anyway, from there, let's take a look, right? Then there's that first page where they start laying the beats to them, right? Take a look here. Righty right. And here was the page to mimic that. Not too many changes, but look at the position Subby's in. There, he's getting a backhand from Sandman at the top there, right? Okay. Just keep that in mind, right? Now, like, again, let's see. Page 2. Yeah, like, look at Subby there, but look at the way it was originally rendered. It's so much better. Like, why wouldn't I just draw it like that? I look at this now and I think what it was I was intimidated by the back. Not having an awareness of the back, even though I'm looking right at it. But what made me put the figure in that position? Right? Because this one actually looks really awkward. Doesn't really work. But what, who can tell? 13, trying to get things down now. So moving on to the next. Now this is where it gets crazy. Remember I showed you that crazy pic of Sandy getting on Spidey there? That's some... Anyway, I'm not going to use the word, but pretty gross in a way. If you like, where's his fist going? Duh, hello, hey Johnny R. I have a feeling you might be a little bit embarrassed about this one, but if you had to be, then everyone had to be. That's some... What? What's going on there? No. I'd be changing that. And in fact, I did. When I went to do my panels, right? And there's the building torn apart and all that stuff. But when I did I just got that whole idea of that position out of there and put Spidey sideways so it looks like he's getting hit in the lower back, cracked across the lower back by a fist of sand, right? By Sandy there. There's the stuff with the buildings and stuff. It's really coarse stuff. It's so terrible when I look at it now today. But I would do this again and again. And I have about 3 or 4 examples of that. Pictures from renderings of the actual issues I had at the time. And in future, we'll go ahead and show those. But yeah, I just thought I'd touch upon that today while I was coming across it in the bio. Research I was doing with the pics and stuff, just making a course recording. But yeah, it's funny to see how one can develop over time. And those are from 1983, these pics. Funny, again, colored directly onto the paper after the inks are applied and stuff. Again, no concept of inking at that time, and the coloring process direct is just something that isn't done. Most people know that it's a separate process altogether. Even if you were to take original art and photocopy, you would render your colors over the photocopies and not the actual. But what did I know? I'd have to learn. Even though later, outside of painting, when I was doing comic book work, I would, start to care a little less and less and less about color. Which is not necessarily a good thing or whatever. It's just that I was more concentrating on form. And eventually I'd get better at form. Here's some penciled work of original Spidey stuff of mine. That would take place about, a little less than 20 years later. That's that one. As well as an inked portion, penciled and inked portion. That Gobby picture, by the way, that was actually... He was actually inspired from... Oh, God. I think it was a Gil Kane inner pic of the whole Gwen Stacy, Death of Green Goblin, Death of Stacy and Goblins, I should say, in 121, 122 was, or whatever. I think I got it out of Marvel Tales or something, the actual inspiration for that figure. But then went ahead and fleshed out my Spidey and the buildings around in the backgrounds and all that stuff. Things were moving along, Even though I had kind of neglected drawing. It's not like I was drawing every day and being dedicated to it. This was more of a resurgence where I came back to it yet again in life. And at the turn of the century where I started getting more enthusiastic and trying different things. I bought a new table at the time, whatever. But from there would be more to come.